January 17th, 1945. The icy wind cuts across the Ardennes, biting through uniforms and flesh alike. Mud churns under the endless tracks of Sherman tanks, their engines growling through the dense fog. The American Third Army presses forward, its columns stretching over frozen fields and battered villages. From the observation point atop a ruined church steeple, General George S. Patton watches the chaos below. Smoke curls from destroyed German vehicles, mingling with the bitter scent of gunpowder and frost. Soldiers shout, the clatter of artillery punctuating the hollow silence of the forest. Patton's horse, restless under the weight of his presence, paws at the frozen earth. A mirror of the urgency coursing through the men. Every decision he makes now could fracture the fragile balance of the front. German commanders, entrenched and calculating, know his reputation, swift, unpredictable, merciless in execution. Even from miles away, the ripple of his movement sends tremors through the enemy lines. Orders are barked, maps unfurled, and the first volleys of a battle that will redefine winter warfare are fired. The storm of Patton's advance is imminent, and nothing in the Ardennes will remain unchanged. Transitioning into the broader strategic stage of Europe in 1945 sets the frame for the forces converging on him. By early 1944, the Allies had secured a tenuous foothold in Western Europe, but the war's outcome remained uncertain. The German Wehrmacht, though battered on multiple fronts, retained pockets of formidable strength, fortified positions, and commanders experienced in mobile defense. In the United States, military planners recognized the need for decisive leadership capable of exploiting both speed and firepower. George S. Patton, a veteran of World War I and North Africa campaigns, had earned a reputation as a relentless tactician, unafraid of risk, and a master of armored warfare. His rise through the ranks was neither linear nor without controversy. Criticized for his blunt demeanor, disciplinary rigidity, and occasional lapses in decorum, Patton nonetheless displayed an uncanny ability to inspire soldiers under extreme conditions. Patton's philosophy centered on mobility and aggression. Unlike other commanders who preferred methodical, cautious advances, he believed in rapid penetration of enemy lines, striking where German defenses were weakest. His staff often referred to him as a storm on horseback, capable of creating opportunities out of apparent chaos. In mid-1944, as preparations for Operation Overlord progressed, Patton was deliberately assigned to command the fictitious 1st U.S. Army Group, part of a strategic deception to mislead German intelligence about the actual invasion site. This role reinforced the perception of him as both a formidable planner and unpredictable adversary. The context of his European deployment was defined by the interaction of multiple Allied forces. British, Canadian, and American units converged along the Normandy coastline. Yet coordination challenges and differing operational doctrines slowed progress. German forces, though initially caught off guard by the D-Day landings, rapidly mobilized reserves and fortified positions inland. Patton's eventual reassignment to command the U.S. Third Army in France placed him at the vanguard of a force structured for offensive momentum. His army, a combination of infantry, mechanized armor, and artillery, was designed for operational flexibility, capable of sustaining rapid thrusts while maintaining supply lines through devastated terrain. Patton's reputation alone began to shape the strategic calculus of the Wehrmacht. German intelligence reports consistently highlighted his speed, decisiveness, and willingness to exploit gaps with minimal hesitation. Officers in the Oberkommando des Heeres OKH observed that where Patton led, German units were forced into reactive postures, abandoning rigid defensive lines to chase a constantly moving threat. In the weeks leading up to the Battle of the Bulge, intercepted communications revealed anxiety among German generals about the unpredictability of his maneuvers. Unlike Allied commanders who adhered to cautious advances and consolidated gains before moving forward, Patton's doctrine emphasized relentless pressure. The terrain of northern France and the Ardennes posed unique challenges. Forested hills, narrow roads, and frozen rivers complicated logistical operations. Tanks and mechanized units were prone to becoming stuck in mud or snowdrifts, while artillery units struggled to maintain range and accuracy. Patton, however, viewed these obstacles as opportunities for audacious maneuvers. His emphasis on reconnaissance and rapid adaptation meant that his forces often arrived at points the Germans considered secure, finding themselves under fire from unexpected angles. This approach did not merely rely on brute force, it integrated intelligence gathering, engineering units, clearing roads, and the coordination of combined arms to maximize shock and disruption. By late 1944, Patton's movements in France exemplified the culmination of decades of military evolution, emerged lessons from previous conflicts with a modern understanding of mechanized warfare, emphasizing speed, coordination, and psychological impact. His army moved with a rhythm that German commanders struggled to predict. Radio intercepts, captured documents, and prisoner interrogations repeatedly noted the Patton factor, an aggressive commander whose actions forced adversaries into defensive improvisation, often creating openings for his subordinate units to exploit. The stage was set for confrontation. Across Europe, fronts stabilized briefly only to fracture under sudden decisive action. Patton's Third Army, though just one element of the larger Allied advance, embodied the principle of initiative. His presence was more than symbolic. It dictated the tempo of operations, shaped enemy expectations, and would, in the coming months, define both the conduct and perception of modern armored warfare. Patton's approach, grounded in historical lessons yet executed with a singular intensity, inevitably led to encounters that tested not only strategy, but the morale and resilience of men on both sides. These dynamics created a tension that would culminate in battles remembered for their audacity, speed, and the terror they instilled in the German high command. The German military situation in late 1944 reflected both resilience and desperation. On the Western Front, Hitler's forces were stretched thin, supplies dwindling, and manpower increasingly exhausted. Experienced divisions had been decimated in Normandy, while newly formed units, often composed of hastily trained recruits, struggled to hold lines against the advancing Allies. Intelligence assessments within the Oberkommando de Heere repeatedly emphasized the unpredictability of Allied armored movements, highlighting Patton's Third Army as a critical threat. Reports described his maneuvers as fast and unrelenting, noting that entire sectors could collapse under his pressure within hours. German commanders, including Field Marshal von Rundstedt and General Hasso von Manteuffel, had observed the cumulative impact of Patton's previous campaigns in France and Lorraine. The speed at which he bypassed fortified positions, forced river crossings, and exploited enemy weak points created a level of operational stress rarely encountered. Units faced not only the physical onslaught of tanks and artillery, but the psychological strain of being constantly outmaneuvered. Intercepts indicated that German intelligence analysts debated how to predict Patton's next move, often acknowledging that his combination of audacity and logistics mastery made him unlike any other Allied commander. By December 1944, the Allies had advanced to the borders of Germany, consolidating supply lines and preparing for winter offensives. Patton's Third Army, after months of rapid advances through northern France, Luxembourg, and the Ardennes, was positioned to exploit any breach in German defenses. Intelligence suggested that German commanders feared his operational speed more than any other factor, understanding that even a single misjudgment could result in catastrophic encirclement or collapse. Unlike other Allied formations, which adhered to methodical incremental gains, Patton's army embodied initiative and relentless pursuit. The human dimension of Patton's reputation compounded his threat. Soldiers and officers alike internalized the notion that wherever he appeared, momentum would follow. German units reported that his presence alone seemed to accelerate American movements, as if the Third Army operated with a consciousness beyond typical command structure. Frontline reports often described encounters with American forces who, though sometimes outnumbered, struck with precision and coordinated ferocity. Reconnaissance patrols returned with accounts of rapid maneuvers and an overwhelming tempo of operations, feeding German fears that Patton's leadership could not be countered through conventional defensive planning. Technologically, Patton's forces leveraged mechanized armor and mobile artillery in ways that German commanders had not consistently encountered. The Third Army's coordination of Sherman tanks, mechanized infantry, and mobile artillery created a force multiplier capable of concentrating firepower at precise points and then redeploying before the enemy could respond. Patton's insistence on continuous reconnaissance and logistics ensured that fuel, ammunition, and spare parts reached units in advance, minimizing downtime and maintaining operational momentum. German observers, recognizing these capabilities, began to adjust defensive doctrine, often at the cost of splitting their forces or abandoning positions prematurely. The broader strategic environment amplified Patton's significance. While the Allies sought to maintain cohesion across multiple fronts, the Germans struggled with fragmented command and limited reserves. Hitler's obsession with holding ground led to rigid defensive orders, often conflicting with the reality on the battlefield. Patton exploited these systemic weaknesses, understanding that speed, surprise, and audacity could undermine even the most meticulously prepared positions. In the Ardennes, for example, his rapid response to the German counter-offensive during the Battle of the Bulge demonstrated how operational flexibility could reverse the trajectory of a crisis, turning potential setbacks into opportunities for decisive advantage. The confluence of Patton's leadership style, operational philosophy, and technological advantage created a force that German generals feared uniquely. He embodied a type of warfare that was both relentless and intelligent, combining aggressive maneuvering with meticulous planning. This duality made him a singular challenge. Every movement carried risk for both sides, but the balance consistently favored his army. Reports from captured German officers often cited him not merely as a competent opponent, but as an existential threat to their strategic calculations. By the winter of 1944 to 1945, the stage was fully set. The Allies held momentum but required commanders who could sustain it under extreme conditions. The Germans were entrenched, desperate, and aware of a commander whose reputation alone could disrupt their plans. Patton's Third Army, poised for rapid action, would soon confront a series of engagements that tested not only strategy and tactics, but the endurance, morale, and adaptability of both sides. The next stage would examine the multiple dimensions, human, tactical, technological, psychological, that defined his unique impact on the war. Patton's tactical approach relied on relentless momentum and flexibility. Unlike commanders who prioritized fortified positions, he sought to create operational dilemmas for the enemy, forcing German units to react rather than initiate. His use of combined arms, armor, mechanized infantry, artillery, and air support was precise and integrated. During the Lorraine campaign, for instance, Patton orchestrated multiple thrusts that bypassed heavily defended towns, striking at weaker points in German lines. This forced the Wehrmacht to redistribute forces continuously, creating exploitable gaps. Patton's reliance on speed over static defense reshaped the battlefield. German reports repeatedly noted that he struck where they least expected, undermining morale and eroding their ability to plan coherent counterattacks. Patton's leadership was both inspirational and intimidating. He demanded discipline, personal courage, and initiative, often addressing troops directly, emphasizing pride in achievement and instilling urgency. Soldiers described him as a force that amplified morale through presence alone. His inspection of units, mounted on horseback or moving between columns, became a psychological weapon. Yet he also inspired fear, not through cruelty but through expectation. Soldiers understood that failure or hesitation would compromise the entire operation. This duality, motivation coupled with uncompromising standards, created an army capable of executing complex maneuvers under extreme conditions, sustaining operational tempo when others might falter. Central to Patton's impact was the mastery of mechanized warfare. He leveraged the speed and firepower of armored units to create operational shock. Tanks were not merely instruments of firepower, but tools for psychological dominance, clearing roads, and opening passages for infantry. Supply chains were optimized for continuous movement. Fuel and ammunition reached units at the front lines faster than German planners anticipated. Patton's philosophy rejected static engagement. He constantly sought avenues for breakthrough. This emphasis on rapid, coordinated movement allowed the Third Army to execute encirclements, flank attacks, and deep penetration maneuvers with a level of operational tempo that German generals struggled to match. The fear Patton inspired among German commanders was a force multiplier. Intelligence reports from captured documents highlighted phrases such as "Patton always strikes when least expected," and his army moves faster than our maps can follow. German units, uncertain where or when the Third Army would appear, often abandoned prepared defenses or misallocated forces to counter phantom threats. Patton's reputation created a climate of uncertainty that compounded battlefield losses. Soldiers and officers alike operated under constant pressure, aware that delays or miscalculations could result in rapid encirclement. This psychological dimension magnified the effectiveness of his tactical and operational decisions, making him a uniquely formidable opponent. Patton maximized the capabilities of the equipment at his disposal. Sherman tanks, M4 variants, and mechanized artillery were deployed not only for firepower but for operational mobility. Reconnaissance units, supported by jeeps and light armored vehicles, scouted ahead, identifying weak points in German lines. Engineers followed closely, clearing roads and bridges to maintain the army's momentum. Unlike many contemporaries, Patton integrated these assets into a seamless operational rhythm, ensuring that technological advantage translated directly into tactical surprise. German commanders recognized that their numerical superiority often failed to counter his mechanized efficiency. Patton understood the human element as a strategic tool. His insistence on discipline, physical fitness, and rapid adaptation cultivated soldiers capable of enduring extreme conditions while executing complex maneuvers. Field reports from Normandy to the Ardennes noted that American units under his command displayed cohesion under fire, often recovering quickly from setbacks. Patton's ability to read morale and respond decisively ensured that the Third Army maintained offensive pressure even in adverse weather and terrain. The human factor, combined with mobility and firepower, created an interdependent system of operational effectiveness. Patton's reputation forced German leaders into defensive postures they could not sustain. Commanders such as von Rundstedt and Model were repeatedly confronted with dilemmas: hold static positions or risk being outflanked. Patton's rapid advances often exploited indecision, magnifying the impact of even minor tactical errors. He anticipated reactions, predicting the adjustments German units would make and positioning his forces to exploit them. This predictive capability, based on both experience and meticulous reconnaissance, made him a constant operational threat. Patton's approach carried moral and reputational consequences. His aggressive methods occasionally resulted in higher casualties, drawing criticism from peers and political leaders. Yet these decisions reflected a calculated balance. Speed and shock reduced prolonged engagements, potentially limiting overall attrition compared to slower offensives. Controversies surrounding his strict discipline, confrontations with superiors, and blunt rhetoric reinforced the perception of him as uncompromising. German commanders, observing both the operational and human dimensions of his leadership, understood that Patton's unpredictability extended beyond tactics into moral and psychological influence. Collectively, these angles explain why German generals feared Patton more than any other Allied commander. He combined speed, mechanized precision, psychological dominance, tactical innovation, and disciplined leadership into a singular operational force. Each dimension reinforced the others, producing an army whose presence alone could destabilize enemy strategy. The consequences extended beyond individual battles, influencing planning at corps and army levels, and forcing German high command to expend scarce resources, countering a commander whose methods they could not fully anticipate. The cumulative effect of these dimensions created a battlefield environment defined as much by perception and psychological pressure as by firepower. Patton's approach would soon culminate in decisive engagements where the full scope of his operational philosophy and the resulting fear among German commanders would become indisputable. December 16, 1944. The Ardennes forest, shrouded in winter fog, became the stage for one of the most critical confrontations of World War II, the German Ardennes Offensive, later known as the Battle of the Bulge. The Wehrmacht struck with surprising force, aiming to split the Allied lines and capture Antwerp. Initial advances created chaos, displacing American units and isolating key positions. German commanders anticipated slowing Allied reaction through surprise and speed. Yet they had underestimated the capacity for rapid counteraction embodied in one man, General George S. Patton. At 3-0 on December 17th, Patton received orders to redirect the Third Army northward, a maneuver spanning over 100 miles through roads clogged with snow, ice, and retreating units. Unlike other commanders who might have delayed to consolidate, Patton immediately assessed terrain, vehicle readiness, and infantry positioning. The Third Army's mobility, previously tested in France and Lorraine, became decisive. Tanks rumbled through narrow roads, engineers cleared choke points, and reconnaissance units relayed real-time updates, allowing continuous adjustment to the enemy's position. German forces, expecting disorganization, were instead confronted by a counter-march executed with precision, timing, and audacity. Patton's personal involvement amplified the effectiveness of this movement. From forward command posts, he issued orders directly to battalion leaders, inspected vulnerable routes, and ensured that coordination between armor and infantry was unbroken. Field dispatches highlighted that units felt his presence as a catalyst, accelerating movement and maintaining focus under extreme stress. German intelligence, intercepting partial communications, reported confusion and fear. The Third Army advanced faster than anticipated, striking flanks of units already engaged with other Allied formations. Key to this operation was Patton's prioritization of speed over static confrontation. Instead of engaging the strongest enemy positions head-on, he orchestrated diversionary attacks, feints, and envelopments. Sherman and Cromwell tanks penetrated secondary roads, bypassing villages fortified by German infantry. Artillery units, maneuverable and synchronized, neutralized enemy strong points, opening pathways for mechanized infantry. The result was a series of continuous overlapping threats that German commanders struggled to counter. For the first time in the offensive, the Wehrmacht confronted not merely opposition, but a force that dictated the tempo and direction of the engagement. The human element played a pivotal role. Soldiers under Patton's command operated under extreme cold, minimal sleep, and constant threat from both artillery and snipers. His insistence on discipline, rapid adaptation, and cohesion enabled units to execute complex maneuvers while sustaining pressure. Eyewitness accounts noted the psychological impact. German units, already stretched thin and demoralized, encountered American forces advancing with apparent ease, forcing retreats that compounded chaos. Patton's reputation for rapid, aggressive action created a feedback loop. Fear accelerated German errors, which in turn amplified American gains. By December 22nd, the Third Army had completed the northward pivot, reaching critical points near Bastogne, where elements of the 101st Airborne held against encirclement. Patton's maneuvers relieved pressure, re-established supply routes, and prevented the German offensive from achieving strategic objectives. The rapidity of the advance, combined with tactical ingenuity, highlighted the interplay between planning, speed, and psychological dominance. German commanders, previously confident in their surprise attack, recognized that they were facing a commander capable of transforming adversity into operational advantage with unmatched efficiency. The Ardennes campaign exemplified the decisive impact of Patton's approach. Rapid mechanized movement, combined arms integration, and personal leadership created a situation in which conventional German assumptions about Allied response no longer applied. Every misstep by German units was exploited, and the cumulative effect shifted the trajectory of the offensive. The Third Army's advance demonstrated that Patton's presence was more than symbolic. It directly altered battlefield outcomes, forcing enemy forces into reactive and increasingly desperate positions. The subsequent days of December 1944 solidified Patton's impact on the Ardennes Offensive. German forces attempting to maintain momentum encountered relentless American counter-thrusts. Patton's army executed a series of flanking maneuvers, exploiting both terrain and the dispersed state of enemy units. Narrow roads and frozen rivers that had slowed German advances now became channels for Patton's coordinated armor infantry columns. His operational philosophy, speed, surprise, and integration, turned logistical obstacles into tactical advantages. Engineers repaired bridges under fire, enabling tanks and supply trucks to maintain unbroken momentum, while artillery provided suppressive fire to neutralize pockets of resistance. The Battle of Bastogne became a critical focal point. German commanders, aware that the 101st Airborne's defense threatened their objectives, diverted forces to encircle the town. Patton, anticipating this, accelerated Third Army movements, arriving with mechanized units that struck German flanks and rear positions. His timing was precise. Columns converged at the edge of Bastogne on December 26, relieving the besieged garrison and creating immediate tactical pressure on the overstretched German forces. Field reports noted that the speed and coordination of the relief operation left enemy units disoriented, unable to mount coherent resistance or regroup for counterattacks. Patton's decisions were informed by both operational foresight and real-time intelligence. Forward reconnaissance reported German troop movements, artillery placements, and road conditions. Command posts relayed these updates directly to Patton, who then adjusted marching orders, rerouted armor, and positioned infantry to maximize the effect of shock and mobility. The resulting operational rhythm maintained initiative at every stage, ensuring that German units, even in defensive positions, could not predict the point or timing of the next assault. The cumulative effect was decisive. German attacks stalled, momentum shifted, and the Third Army regained territory lost in the initial surprise of the offensive. The psychological dimension remained critical. German commanders, already aware of Patton's reputation, faced mounting fear as news of the Third Army's rapid northward push spread. Intercepted communications revealed anxiety about encirclement, loss of supply lines, and the unpredictability of American maneuvers. The combination of operational precision, speed, and visibility amplified Patton's effect beyond the immediate battlefield, forcing German strategic recalculations under extreme pressure. Units diverted to counter potential Patton advances weakened other sectors, further eroding the overall effectiveness of the offensive. By early January 1945, the Third Army's operations had decisively contributed to the collapse of the German Ardennes Offensive. Patton's rapid maneuvers stabilized the front, liberated encircled units, and re-established operational superiority. Casualty reports and post-battle assessments documented significant German losses in both personnel and materiel, while Allied forces regained initiative. The speed and audacity of the Third Army, combined with Patton's personal leadership, rendered what might have been a temporary setback into a strategic failure for the Wehrmacht. This sequence of events illustrates the defining characteristics of Patton's impact: decisiveness under pressure, integration of mechanized mobility with combined arms, and an acute understanding of psychological leverage against enemy forces. German generals, forced to react rather than dictate, consistently fell behind the operational tempo set by Patton. The Ardennes Offensive transformed from a potential turning point for Germany into a demonstration of how one commander's combination of speed, foresight, and leadership could nullify an enemy's strategic advantage. The Ardennes campaign closed with the realization that German calculations had repeatedly underestimated the speed and aggression of Patton's forces. This understanding would inform both Allied and Axis planning in the final months of the European War. The consequences extended beyond immediate battlefield gains. Patton's operational philosophy had redefined expectations of maneuver warfare, demonstrating that rapid, integrated, and psychologically amplified action could decisively shape the course of large-scale engagements. By January 1945, the Ardennes Offensive had collapsed, leaving the German army weakened and disorganized. Patton's Third Army had regained lost ground, restored supply lines, and inflicted substantial losses on enemy formations. Estimates indicate that German casualties, including killed, wounded, and captured, exceeded 80,000, while material losses included hundreds of tanks, artillery pieces, and vehicles. Allied forces suffered fewer casualties in comparison, a direct result of Patton's emphasis on rapid maneuvers and tactical precision that minimized prolonged engagements. The operational consequences extended beyond battlefield statistics. German commanders, forced into continuous defensive postures, experienced a severe erosion of morale and confidence. Field Marshal von Rundstedt and General Model recognized that their strategic initiatives had been nullified, not merely by force, but by the Third Army's relentless operational tempo. Intelligence reports and post-battle debriefs highlighted repeated misjudgments. Units were outflanked, roads presumed secure became contested, and reserves intended for counterattacks were neutralized before deployment. Patton's capacity to integrate speed, firepower, and human coordination created a level of unpredictability that German forces could not mitigate. Patton's reputation, already formidable, was cemented through the Ardennes campaign. Accounts from soldiers emphasize his presence as a decisive factor. Brigadier generals and battalion commanders reported that his inspections, briefings, and direct oversight accelerated decision-making, reduced hesitation, and maintained morale under extreme winter conditions. Units that had previously struggled to coordinate complex maneuvers now operated with remarkable cohesion. German prisoners consistently cited Patton by name as a symbol of relentless American aggression, reinforcing his psychological impact at both operational and strategic levels. The aftermath also underscored the broader strategic value of mobility. Patton's emphasis on mechanized armor, reconnaissance, and logistical foresight allowed his army to achieve results disproportionate to numerical strength. Roads cleared of obstacles, supply chains optimized, and rapid redeployment enabled continuous offensive pressure, leaving German forces reactive rather than proactive. The Third Army's performance set a benchmark for mechanized warfare, influencing post-war military doctrine and shaping the Allied approach to subsequent operations in Germany. Political and Allied command assessments further reinforced Patton's significance. Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force SHAEF reports praised the speed and decisiveness of the relief of Bastogne and subsequent counter-offensives. Patton's methods, though sometimes controversial due to aggressive tactics and occasional disregard for conventional caution, were recognized as essential for stabilizing the front and exploiting German vulnerabilities. The intersection of tactical innovation, psychological influence, and operational efficiency demonstrated that a single commander's decisions could alter the trajectory of a large-scale campaign. The Ardennes campaign also clarified lessons in combined arms integration. Infantry, armor, artillery, and air support were no longer separate elements but interdependent components orchestrated under unified command. Patton's insistence on synchronized operations ensured that weaknesses in one element could be compensated by strengths in another. German reports repeatedly emphasized the difficulty of predicting American movements, citing the integration of mechanized units with supporting firepower as a critical factor in operational surprise. These outcomes reinforced Patton's unique position among Allied commanders. While other generals achieved victories through methodical planning and consolidation, Patton's approach emphasized tempo, initiative, and psychological pressure. The consequences of his campaigns extended beyond immediate tactical gains, shaping the strategic environment in the final months of the European conflict. German commanders learned, often at great cost, that the speed, audacity, and coordination of Patton's forces were as formidable as their firepower. The operational and strategic consequences of Patton's actions extended into early 1945. Following the failure of the Ardennes Offensive, German forces were forced into continuous defensive operations across the Western Front. The Third Army's rapid maneuvers disrupted German plans, strained reserves, and created opportunities for Allied offensives elsewhere. Units that had been intended to reinforce counterattacks were redeployed to address unexpected flanking threats, leaving multiple sectors vulnerable. Patton's operational rhythm imposed a reactive posture on the Wehrmacht that persisted through the final months of the war. The material impact was significant. German losses in tanks, artillery, and vehicles further reduced their operational mobility. Reports from captured supply depots indicated shortages of fuel and ammunition exacerbated by Patton's rapid advance. These logistical constraints limited the Wehrmacht's capacity to regroup, forcing reliance on poorly trained units or static defenses that could be neutralized by Allied mechanized forces. In effect, Patton's campaigns not only inflicted immediate tactical defeats, but also created cumulative operational disadvantages that accelerated the collapse of German resistance. Patton's leadership style remained a decisive factor. Field reports and post-war analyses repeatedly note that the Third Army's cohesion, morale, and speed were directly attributable to his presence. Soldiers described a combination of fear, respect, and inspiration. Under extreme conditions, units executed complex maneuvers with precision. German prisoners frequently cited Patton by name, acknowledging both his audacity and the relentless pressure his forces imposed. This psychological dimension magnified physical victories, as the anticipation of Patton's movements forced German commanders to make conservative or premature decisions, compounding their operational difficulties. Strategically, Patton's influence extended beyond individual battles. The liberation of key towns and supply routes facilitated further Allied advances into Germany. The Third Army's ability to respond rapidly to German counterattacks stabilized front lines, prevented encirclement of other Allied formations, and enabled coordinated offensives in the Rhineland and southern Germany. Patton's operations demonstrated that high-speed, integrated mechanized warfare could decisively alter the operational landscape, providing a model for modern combined arms doctrine. Contemporary evaluations reinforced this perception. SHAFE assessments highlighted Patton's ability to integrate tactical, technological, and human factors into a coherent operational force. Allied commanders acknowledged his effectiveness in restoring initiative and momentum during crises. German post-war analyses similarly recognized that Patton's unpredictability and operational speed were major factors in their failures, underscoring a broader lesson. Leadership that combines decisiveness, coordination, and psychological insight can be as decisive as numerical or material superiority. The cumulative effect of Patton's campaigns reshaped the operational environment of late-war Europe. German forces, depleted in both morale and material, were unable to mount effective large-scale counteroffensives. Allied units benefited from restored supply lines, liberated towns, and the psychological advantage of a commander whose speed and aggression consistently forced enemy errors. Patton's Third Army emerged as a model of operational efficiency, illustrating that decisive leadership, combined arms mastery, and rapid maneuvering could dictate the terms of battle. The Ardennes campaign and its aftermath established Patton's enduring reputation. German generals feared his presence more than any other Allied commander because his actions consistently created strategic dilemmas they could not resolve. Beyond immediate victories, his campaigns accelerated the collapse of German defensive capacity, demonstrating the profound operational and psychological impact a single commander could exert over the course of a campaign. George S. Patton's campaigns in the final months of the European War illustrate a principle that extends beyond any single battle. Leadership defines the rhythm of conflict. His mastery of speed, mechanized mobility, and combined arms integration transformed operational theory into battlefield reality. Patton did not simply react to events, he shaped them, forcing the enemy into positions of disadvantage through both maneuver and perception. The fear he inspired among German commanders was not abstract. It reflected a tangible, operational reality. Decisions were delayed, positions abandoned, and counterattacks misallocated because of the psychological and strategic pressure he exerted. Patton's impact was both physical and moral. He demonstrated that discipline, cohesion, and rapid adaptation could magnify technological and numerical advantages. Tanks, artillery, and infantry became extensions of a single operational will, executing maneuvers with precision under extreme conditions. Soldiers under his command internalized his urgency, sustaining momentum where others might falter. At the same time, his audacity imposed costs on the enemy that exceeded the immediate effects of firepower alone. German generals, calculating both force ratios and psychological strain, repeatedly found themselves outmaneuvered and unprepared. Historically, Patton's campaigns reshaped the understanding of modern warfare. The Ardennes and preceding advances revealed the decisive value of operational tempo, the integration of mechanized units, and the use of leadership as a force multiplier. His methods emphasized that battles are won not only through attrition, but through initiative, surprise, and the orchestration of human, technological, and tactical elements. Patton's approach forced both Allied and Axis planners to reconsider assumptions about defensive rigidity, mobility, and the psychological dimension of command. Ultimately, Patton's legacy is inseparable from the fear he inspired. German generals feared him not merely because of victories or tactics, but because he demonstrated the tangible consequences of decisive, relentless leadership. In his campaigns, speed became strategy, initiative became power, and leadership became a weapon. The lessons of Patton's command endure. Warfare is shaped as much by the intellect and decisiveness of commanders as by the armies they lead. His operations in the Ardennes and across Europe exemplify a rare alignment of human will, technological application, and tactical genius, an enduring benchmark in military history.